This video is brought to you by Dashlane. Use the code LowSpecGamer for a 10% discount in your annual subscription. My oh my Google Stadia. It has been a while since I have seen the release of anything in gaming with this much marketing money behind it, and with such an interesting and often divided internet opinion. Back when it was announced at GDC, I was on site both to try it out and to parse some of the largest questions that I had about this upcoming service, with the potential of changing the industry for better or for worse. Since then, details have surfaced, passions have been flared on, and I have had the opportunity to try a newer version of the service during Gamescom, and that, combined with some of the new details, provide a clearer view on what is the game Google is playing, and this has led to some interesting conclusions. If you're with a group of people who are raging at the existence of the service and cloud gaming in general, I believe that Stadia is not meant for you, and I mean this in the most literal sense of the word. You are not the target consumer in Google plans, and that begs the question, who is it? For those living under a rock and that refuse to watch my older video about the topic, Stadia is a game streaming service where games run on custom hardware on a Google server and the video footage is piped to you via streaming. This on itself is not a new concept. I have explored on this channel a lot of the smaller services trying a version of that with varying degrees of success, with 3 of them working very well when a stable connection was maintained and no obscure technical difficulties happened with the client. However, decent cloud gaming was still arguably an expensive option, at least until mega corporation Google decided to enter the playground. Google's promise is gaming at highest graphical settings, conveniently available at any time, in most devices with a strong internet connection, in a supported country with a small penalty on latency, since it takes time for inputs to get from you to the server running the game and back. Google has promised that they're leveraging the vast expertise on video streaming and compression technology not to eliminate latency entirely, but to create an experience where the user does not necessarily feel it, as their GDC developer talks, of which there's still no public video, focus on the metrics they're using to alter the streaming algorithm to all sorts of bad connection conditions to maximize user satisfaction. The sort of technology that only someone with deep pockets as Google is able to pull off. However, a large number of people in the most avid gaming communities have raised very legitimate concerns over Stadia, centered around the idea of games being inaccessible to modification, access to games being controlled entirely by a third party, which means no game preservation or ownership, lowering of a game quality due to video compression and bit latency, and unrealistic connection requirements. Let's start with the first point, the inability to modify games, and let me rephrase something that I touched upon in my last Stadia video. If you are the sort of person who builds his or her own PC to play games, or buys pre-builds, or keeps up with new components and advancements on PC gaming, you are very far from Stadia's target consumer. People have again and again identified a lot of the key things that you will not be able to do with Stadia, and these are all things that can be said about consoles. Look at it this way. During their presentation, they straight up described their value proposal as:
instead of needing to buy a console to play your games, we give you access to Google's powerful custom data centers.
Even the booth material was like, play your favorite games without a console. Console. I have been trying to find more marketing material to make sure of this, but I can't find a single time that they have pitched this as an alternative or competition to PC gaming. But I think we can go more specific. I believe Google's plan is to take a chunk out of a very specific part of the console market. Let's look at other points to show you what I mean. Access to games being controlled by a third party. Game preservation and ownership has been something that has been negatively impacted over the years as games become more digital, and we can already see the consequences of that, with some very interesting titles having almost vanished from the gaming world, and at least on PC, there's some measures that can and are constantly taken to preserve some of these games for the future, which inevitably opens up the topic of piracy and DRM, which I do not have time to go into right now, and I will leave that for the future. But with games exclusive to Stadia, there's absolutely no way to conserve them, and when the service stops operating, they're gone. As a game enthusiast, I'm very concerned about this, but as a consumer, I feel this is a thing that only matters philosophically to the most avid followers of this medium, and not a practical concern to a lot of people that simply want to play. Look at it this way, I have friends and colleagues that are tremendous enthusiasts and authorities on topics such as film or music, and people in those circles possibly continuously look at the increasing digital dominance of music and movies as dangerous to the medium and prefer to have their art in a physical, preservable form. I like a lot of movies and a lot of music, but I simply do not care about preserving them enough to outweigh the convenience of just having everything digital, with the exception of very small number of collector items. And in that sense, Stadia is for someone with an approach to convenience over possession to games similar to my approach to music and movies. And this is not much of an speculation on my part, as the AMA by the director of product of Stadia makes it very clear. To the credit of game preservationists, it is easier to archive a digital-only movie or song for the future than a game that only exists via streaming with no access to an executable. Although, again, this is also the case for digital-only games on console that usually require piles over piles of exploits and hacks to be preserved. It is just that in the case of streaming, it just might be entirely impossible. The whole one company controls your entire game library aspect has a more practical issue over game preservation, which is lack of trust over buying games that only work on Stadia. I feel a lot of people who raise concerns over having all their games on a platform that could go away tend to forget that especially in the PC space we already have a vast amount of our libraries on digital-only storefronts that could still vanish overnight. I don't like this state of things either, but it is something we have collectively come to accept for convenience and cost. I think the real key difference is that at least in PC there's a certain amount of variety of where you can get your games, and not a single point of failure shall a service disappear, as there are plenty of games that you can get from Steam, GOG, Uplay, or the Epic Games Store? In that sense, Stadia is again more akin to the growing digital sales of consoles, where you have one storefront controlled by the console's company and no certainty that the digital game you're purchasing will work on the next generation of the console. But I think the core dissonance people are feeling is that Steam, Sony, or Microsoft are entities that have been around for so long that we perceive them as stable and long-lasting, versus a service by Google that has a very well-aired reputation of killing stuff when it is not working out. It makes people nervous to invest money into an ecosystem when the company that manages it might shut it down pretty easily. And I think Google knows this, and is sort of planning around it, which might explain the odd pricing system. Stadia has two price tiers, Stadia Pro, which is $10 a month for 4K streaming with access to a growing number of games, so something more like Game Pass than Netflix, and a free tier where all you need to buy is the games. I believe this free tier is where the real magic of their strategy is, and I'm surprised there has not been more discussion about it, and the fact that it's releasing later is very telling. Look at it this way, the Pro tier, which will get you access to the service soon, is very likely an early adopter strategy to test and build confidence for the system to eventually create enough of a feeling of stability to be able to launch the free version with the possibility of a bit of better press. But there's a lot more to be said about the pricing and its timing, so save that point in a box in your head for a moment because we're 100% returning to this later. Let's continue going through the list of issues. Let's talk about loss of quality due to latency or compression artifacting. I tried Doom Eternal and Mortal Kombat 11 working on Stadia on Gamescom thanks to YouTube, as proof of the enormous quantity of money Google is pouring into this venture. Stadia had one of the most slick and flashiest demo booths at Gamescom, complete with constant trailers, demo stations, and a slide that people were lining up to get into? Every year, YouTube tends to have a small launch area for certain creators in events like Gamescom, but this year they integrated the YouTube launch with Stadia to represent the deep integration that is going to be between the two platforms. Inside this launch, there was a demo station for Stadia, which meant an opportunity to test things calmly, which I cannot show you directly because, and here's the part that is insane, we were not allowed to record any video that show the game. So let me see if I got this straight. If you're a YouTuber, the folks at YouTube Gaming are aware of you and you will already be visiting Gamescom, you might get an invitation email to the YouTube Lounge, a space with food, Wi-Fi and seats successfully designed to facilitate the work of creators recording video on the show, whose exits were constantly mobbed by people on the younger side waiting for what I assume is some uber popular Fortnite YouTuber to pop up, and their faces of disappointment every time I enter or exit the booth will haunt me forever. I got sidetracked again. The point is, they had demonstrations for Stadia inside this lounge to give creators a chance to preview the service, as long as we did not record any gameplay. I was told this is because the developers had not provided authorization for recording the games, but I later found out that certain select creators were both allowed and invited to do videos on their service, so of course YouTube. Some of the people invited to that were friends of mine, and I was really happy to see them there, if only a little bit jealous or irritated. The worst part is, I spent a lot of time with the demos, and they were fine, like much better than I expected. There are obvious compression artifacts, the game looks like a high-res YouTube video, which some people might find horrible, but for a lot of people it's fine. And once it gets moving, you forget about it pretty quickly. I forgot I was trying a streaming demo. There was input latency when you actually tested, but sure enough, you are able to get used to it. Now, fair point, this is supposed to be running on an off-site demo, but this is still super controlled conditions on Google's turf, so I look forward to a closer, independent test on a less ideal environment, but my preliminary positive experience still provided a clearer perspective on a possible future. As I mentioned before in this video, Stadia is not only aimed at console gamers, but squarely on a specific segment of console gamers. First, if you still hold the binary vision of every gamer being just a hardcore person that puts 1,000 hours into every game but an absolute casual, I have to at least point out that it's 2019 and there are many diverse groups of people playing games passionately and participated in fandom for different reasons. The loyalists who have owned the same brand of console for years, or the collector that has a wall with all their game discs perfectly ordered, is likely not going to care about Stadia at all, and vice versa. I don't think Google is trying to reach those people. But in between these two sides, there's a plethora of people who care very much about a specific game or franchises but prefer convenience. Right now, a lot of these people already own a console and there's no practical reason for them to suddenly switch to a platform with a slightly worse experience. In fact, as I mentioned before, I believe the Pro tier launching this year is for early adopters and technologically curious users who are going to stress test the service and provide valuable data towards the real launch, which leads to the immensely interesting free plan. Under Stadia's free plan, users will be able to have access to the service for free up to 1080p and 60 FPS while only having to buy the games, which results as essentially a free next-gen console. It is not a coincidence that the launch date for this is sometime next year, just like the first round of next-gen consoles are coming sometime next year as well. And I will be very surprised if Stadia is not playing cat and mouse to launch their free tier before, but not very far from the new consoles. When the new generation rolls around, and a lot of these gamers will want access to the new FIFA or the new Call of Duty, and might have to consider spending $400 on a new console to do so, they might realize that Google is giving them a console for free, which could allow them to buy the game immediately and start playing at once. And what I have seen in terms of quality loss is probably acceptable considering how convenient this whole thing is. This is why I believe it's not the exclusives that Stadia is pushing so hard, but the fact that they're investing a lot of energy at making sure multi-platform releases also are coming to Stadia. They're going for console parity. When that happens, we might actually see the turnaround that cloud gaming is promising. So, is that it? When the next console gen runs around, this cloud gaming is going to take over and we can say goodbye to game preservation and any user control? What? No, have you been listening to anything that I have been saying? Stadia might become an important alternative for a lot of people, but it has a very specific audience that is not enthusiast PC gamers, collectors, or console loyalists, but it's this sort of intermediate gamer that values convenience and cost. And that lives in this very specific country list and has both no data caps, which are a big problem in the US, and internet that is fast or stable enough to support it. This last point is the still last variable left. Google is promising the world regarding the magic its algorithms can deliver. But if this thing does not work well on this level, on someone's ADSL phone connection, this whole value proposition comes tumbling down. I guess we'll find out when Stadia finally starts rolling out for the pro people soon, and I test it on my grandma's internet. This service is also likely to be attractive for a lot of people stuck on playing on low-end PCs purely due to the lack of resources to buy a console. But as I have stated in the past, the list of countries available for their service is lacking some of the bigger critical areas of people that could use the Stadia free plan, which might imply that they don't have the infrastructure to support this level of cloud gaming yet for gaming growing markets such as South America and Asia. So even if being optimistic, Stadia is not taking over the world, but likely going to become a more convenient service for certain people in developed countries. Again, look at their game announcement list and realize how much energy they're spending on showing that they're going to have a lot of the big multi-platform releases. Now, there is plenty of data supporting the fact that gamers worldwide are growingly multi-platform, which I totally get because I have a Switch. Because when I'm away from my PC, I like playing fantasy dating simulator like any decent man, so I would likely pick several games where I don't care about latency so much and I don't care about really owning the game long term, and have them on Stadia for when I do not have the patience to fiddle with hardware or want just to play immediately. The fact that really bothers me about this whole thing is that there's no way in hell Google is making any money from the free Stadia tier. All this hardware and deployment is super expensive, and then giving them out for free seems more like the modern classic of mega corporations burning through their infinite stores of money to get us addicted to their products and continue their dominance over growing parts of our lives. And considering how Google is starting not to be shy about using the weight of their monopolies around it, is concerning. I mean, don't you love having chunks of your entire life centered around a single account for your cyberpunk corporation of your choosing? Don't you love the feeling that your entire life could be destroyed if a single password leaked? Well, me neither. Which is why I'm continuously happy that these videos are sponsored by Dashlane, because the rate at which my data is leaking this year is not even funny anymore, and I like not having a panic attack anytime my old passwords are figured out. Dashlane is like a Swiss Army knife of security services that integrates several tools into one. You have a VPN that you can use to secure your connections over public Wi-Fi or get over service geolocking. You have leak alerts that let you know when one of your old passwords is published in a paste bin somewhere. And you have a password manager that helps you create secure passwords for all your services and manage them automatically, all stored in a locally encrypted storage of which you are the sole owner of the password. So even if Dashlane gets hacked, no one gets access to your account. All that is synced and stored online is your encrypted storage, never the master password. Dashlane Premium is less than $5 a month, which is much cheaper than getting 3 of those services separately, and if you use my link, you can get the first 30 days absolutely free, and if you like it, you can use the LowSpecGamer code after that to get 10% off your annual subscription, and that is how you can let them know that you came from this channel. I have said this 1,000 times, but it is worth repeating because people don't believe this is not part of the sponsor read. I use Dashlane personally to keep track of the increasing problem that has been my online accounts, and it keeps saving me from nasty situations, so really, it makes me super happy that they're one of my sponsors. Thanks to them for sponsoring, and you for watching all the way here. Oh, Google Stadia.